Hey, this is Brent Jensen, and you're listening to No Sleep Till Sudbury, the show where we talk about the music that makes your skin vibrate. This show is brought to you by Pariah Pickups. What you want, what you need, what you love. Check them out at pariahpickups.com. The show is also brought to you by Storyfora, the writing services and content agency that provides people with communication solutions of all sorts for writing services of any type. Go to Storyfora. That's P-H-O-R-A, Storyfora.com. All right, he is back, my friends. The legendary Rik Emmett joins me on this episode to talk about his new book called Lay It on the Line. As we typically do, we recorded this episode and the next one live from the music room of Rik's home. And as usual, there were lots of laughs, great insights, and rich conversation. Compliments of Mr. Emmett. This is the first part of 2 of our chat, and it was a lot of fun to do. I hope you enjoy it. Here he is, Rik Emmett. That was so cool. That was just like, so I want to talk about that a little bit more.
Okay.
So on my way here, by the way, it's fantastic to be back here, Rik. Thank you so much for welcoming me once again into your home. We're going to talk about where we are in a second, because this is a fantastic new room that I have not seen yet. But
and doesn't it sound lovely?
It's so great.
We've got a nice, big, high ceiling. We've got lots of room. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks.
This is a dream come true for me. This place.
It's unbelievable. It really is. When you walk in the door, it almost takes your breath away. Literally, especially if you're a guitar fan.
I know. Do you ever watch house porn? Like, do you ever watch shows like Escape to the Country?
Always.
Oh, I love that.
Me too.
Right? And they talk about the wow factor. And this room, when you walk through the door into this room, you kind of go, wow.
Yeah, my mouth opened a little bit.
I know. I like it.
Great. Now, Suitcase Blues.
I own it. I own the wow factor.
You do. You definitely do. Suitcase Blues, on my way. You just reminded me of something very interesting that I'd been thinking about when I listened to that song. I was listening to it on the way over here in the car, and you did such a great job with it. And it's from the Just a Game record, which, Triumph was regarded as a hard rock, in some circles, heavy metal band at that time. But for me, that was such a great little ending to that record. And, we talked about before we started rolling here about like how much you enjoyed it, and the guys in Triumph were gracious and let you put it on the end. But I always wondered when I heard that, did that confuse some people? Because you think about the U.S. festival, Motley Crue, Scorpions, Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, right?
Yes.
None of those bands could do something like that, really.
Well, I wouldn't want to be so, hoity-toity as to say they couldn't. They didn't. And it might have been a choice. It might have been a conscious, premeditated kind of, no, I'm never going to go there. I'm not going to. I could, but I won't.
Yeah.
But I liked bands that went, I'm going there.
Yeah.
Because I liked the Beatles, and the Beatles were a band where it was like, hey, if I write, I think Lennon at one point was being sarcastic about McCartney and sort of said, "Oh, is he writing grandma songs?" Like,
right.
Like something along those lines. But the thing is, I like grandma songs.
Mm-hmm.
I like teenage girl songs. I like all kinds of songs if they're good.
Right.
The only thing is that element of goodness. Like, who decides? Well, I decide. It's a subjective thing. We all decide what's good for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And for me, I had a very eclectic, liberal kind of taste. And the other guys in the band didn't have that. And certainly when they were envisioning what Triumph was going to be, they saw it as this, going to put on a giant show, going to be, just rocking,
right.
the whole time. We're just going to be a steamroller that you set it in motion and it doesn't stop. When we did the album Rock and Roll Machine, that was really, I think, what Gil envisioned that the band was going to be. It was going to be a hard rock and roll machine.
Yes.
And then Rik was sort of going to be the embodiment of the song. Rock and Roll Machine is about me. It's about the rocket and playing guitar. So he sort of turned it into a Johnny B. Goode kind of, the guitar now becomes the rock and roll machine. The guy playing the guitar, he's the rock and roll machine. It's all being incorporated into one. But the Just a Game album was me saying, okay, now I want to try to make the band be more in my image,
right.
And this is how I perceive it, that we could be more progressive minded. There could be a little, we're going to push the envelope. We're going to be more like Led Zeppelin where we float and then we hammer, So Suitcase was a thing where, because I had been, a college guitar player, studying at Humber, and the influence of Peter Harris, who was the guy that taught me there, but also, Wes Montgomery and Tal Farlow, and, the list is endless, of guys that were influential. But Joe Pass was, a very influential guitar player in my life. So we were out on the road, and it would have been on the Rock and Roll Machine record or in the States. And I was in a hotel room, and I had a book that Joe Pass had done guitar studies, 12-bar sort of jazz change kind of things. And I was working on one of these things, and I went, this, you could easily kind of cobble together a song if you just stretched out this thing. Oh, if I put a little modulation in here, or if I took the out of the main key of F, if I went, I can go to D minor kind of for the bridge. Mm-hmm. So I had all of these, little ideas that I was sketching out, and I was a musician on the road. And, when you're in a rock band and you've been on the road for your first 2 albums, just incessantly touring, you write songs about being on the bus and being in the hotel rooms and being, the chicks you meet and the characters that inhabit that world, road songs. Musicians write road songs because that's what they know after their first couple of albums. So the third album is always going to have road songs. So it was a road song, Suitcase Blues. We were talking earlier before we turned on the microphones about, the stuff that I'm working on lately. And I've just been writing little kind of, I'm not sure what they're going to be, essays, stories, poems, I'm not sure. But for this album, I'm doing 10 Telecaster tales. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things I was working on this morning was the idea of a writer, a musician, a composer, whatever. And what you do is almost always autobiographical. Mm-hmm. Because you're doing it. It's your ideas coming out of your head and, spilling out onto the page or spilling out onto the guitar strings. It's you. But the other part of it is it's you trying to tie into something that's much bigger than that. That's much more universal than that. That's, the stuff of Mother Nature, the stuff of the planet Earth, the rhythms of life. And so Suitcase was a tune where I was tying into a bloodline, a lineage there, of jazz guitar playing and blues, and where that could be it became a common language on a level that rock bands didn't. As per your question, they didn't go there.
Right.
But in the jazz world, later on in my life, in 1987, I did a project where I worked with Ed Bickert, the famous, amazing maestro of jazz guitar in Canada. That Suitcase Blues could be common ground for me and Ed. Yes. So that, we could sit together and play the song, So some of the greatest moments in my life came out of that song, which I used to play when I was on the road with Dave Dunlop. It was always the last song at the end of the encore, because it's kind of like, instead of ending with a bang, you end up with this kind of, you're softening down to this where everybody's going to listen and everybody's going to feel what it's like to be lonely after the lights have turned out and after you're back in the hotel room. And like, that's the other side of the picture. And everybody can get that. That's a human thing. And that's an emotional thing. And when you write, you're always, to me, I was always looking for that. I didn't care what style the music was or whether or not I was fitting an image that might, get onto television or, get me into a certain demographic of radio airplay. I was really just chasing that thing.
And in essence, that's a microcosm of your new book, really. This is a great tie-in, isn't it?
I guess, sure.
I think so. I was saying to you earlier, one of the things I love about your book is that it's a rock star biography that isn't really a rock star biography at all. And that's what makes it great.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I read lots of other rock star biographies and memoirs and things and autobiographies and stuff just to try and get a sense of what I might try to achieve. And I liked the ones where there was storytelling. I liked that. But I also liked it when it felt like somebody wasn't necessarily so full of themselves that they were just deciding to tell you what they had in their daybook. And that was going to be, a good enough that, the cash registers will ring because my face will be on the cover. And you go, well, I'm going to take all the time and effort to write a book here. I'm going to try and really write something, So my life was about a lot more than just, my rock star itinerary from the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
And you said that to me earlier. I called the Triumph chapter the Triumph chapter, and it's only one of 25 or something like that. I can't remember how many there are.
And I love that because it's one little chapter in a great big life. And that's really what this book is about. And I think that's what people will love about it. That's what I love about it. It's one little piece. But the other thing too, Rick, is that people who are coming for the Triumph stuff will not be disappointed because there's a lot of great Triumph stuff in there too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why you have editors and copy editors. And, I have beta readers and folks that, I had some people pour over that Triumph chapter more than a few times, just to make sure there wasn't anything that somebody might sue me for later. No, I mean, and I mentioned this to you earlier too. I was a college teacher, so I understand about lesson plans and curriculum and, a narrative. How do you build something that, is going to carry you over an 11-week program and through a final exam? A book has to have a kind of a narrative reason for being, And in my case, I had been a college teacher, a father, a husband, a guy in a rock band, but a guy in my own, leader of my own band. And then, a guy that was in duos and guitar trios that went across the country on tour. And I did lots of different things. And so the book was going to have to touch on a lot of different things and what was going to tie it all together, what was going to make it hang as a decent read, But, I feel good about it. I think in the end, I can be proud of in my mind, I think, well, what my grandkids, I go, what about my grandkids' kids? Would anybody bother to pick up the book? And if they did, would they go, great grandpa, what a crazy guy he was, what an interesting guy he was, or he had a story to tell and he told it well, that's what I would hope,
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because just yesterday I was on a podcast and the roles were reversed. I was the guest and I was talking about my first book. And I said, probably one of the best things about writing a book is that you're guaranteeing yourself some measure of immortality.
Yeah.
Right. That's your legacy.
If people buy it, your immortality might be you're in the cutout bin, Which, I've been there, where you get your CD and it's got a hole drilled through the corner of the plastic, okay. Here's a funny story. There was a guy named Shan Kelly who worked at EMI, Capital Canada, and I'd made a label deal there. And so I went there and Dean Cameron at the time was the president of the company, but the record business was already in big trouble. Mm-hmm. It was already, they were making label deals left and right just to get stuff that they could put out and put into the catalog and push out into the market. And they didn't have to pay because you were going to pay. A label deal, you're going to, they're going to be recovering all of their money. Mm-hmm. So he's walking me around and he's showing me the place. And we go out into the warehouse and we're walking around. And he goes, would you like to see who works here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? And I went, yeah, that what? And he goes, right on over here. And he shows me. And there's this giant garbage bin that's outside. And there's this thing that's inside with a chute that runs out. And he goes, that's the grinder. We just throw the plastic in there. No. And it grinds it up and it spits it out. He goes, that's working all the time now. And I go, oh, okay. So that was an insight into the music business. That it was because, you manufacture it up and out it goes, but doesn't necessarily mean it's selling. Or in in the case of your story, it doesn't necessarily mean a book is being read. You wrote it. Okay, it's on a shelf somewhere, but are you going to be able to convince people to take it down and give it a read?
That's right.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Thus, marketing and promotion, which are much bigger monsters than, you and I as book writers.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to get into that in a second, but it's worth noting, one more thing I wanted to talk about is that when you tend to read these books, you see, in your case, it would be Rik Emmett with Neil Strauss or with, a writing assistant of some sort. You don't have that. I've read a lot of rock books, and there's always, it often doesn't matter who it is. There's always a helper, a ghostwriter of sorts. You don't have that. And you did such a great job. I saw that and I thought, okay, how's this going to be? I'd read your poetry book and I really enjoyed it, but it's visceral, it's wistful, it's sentimental, it's funny, it's educational. It's a powerful book. And I know that.
Thank you.
You're
making me blush.
Well, you're a humble guy, I know. But it's worth noting that.
Well, I really appreciate that, you're taking the time to do it here in our little talk. It's lovely to hear. It's what I was aiming for. It's what I hoped for, and I hope that kind of emotional connection, which is, when you're making music, that's what you're hoping to do. Mm-hmm. An intellectual connection, an emotional connection. A memoir can be an opportunity to make those kinds of things happen, So I was shooting for that. Mm-hmm. And of course, I always felt like writing was as much my I think the book makes this pretty clear that my calling is creativity. And so it doesn't really matter to me what the task is. Like, we're going to write a book, or we're going to paint a painting, or we're going to design an album cover, or we're going to write a song, or we're going to put together a symphony orchestra, or, I'm going to design a guitar. To me, it's the creative act. That's the thing that I find compelling. So even when I was, teaching school and it was like, okay, you got to come up with a curriculum, I'd go, okay, I'll chew into that with, both mandibles. Let's go for it. I like to have something where I can be creative, and I chafe when that's the thing that starts to bleed out of it. Mm. So, people could look at my life and go, well, they didn't really, he quit the band he was in. And you go, yeah, but that creatively, it had kind of run its course for me. Right. It had been everything that it could be. I needed to move on to other challenges, and too much in this world. And this is going sort of back to your question about memoirs and ghostwriters and all of that. Mm-hmm. It becomes this economic kind of equation, where somebody goes, okay, well, it's got to be a good book. It's got to be well written. We'll get a writer to write it. So just interview the guy and we'll transcribe the things. Now, having said that, I think Springsteen's memoir was a good one. I think he did write it. I think I think Bruce Springsteen, and I'm not trying to elevate myself here. I'm just saying, I think he is also the kind of guy that goes, all right, a creative thing. I could see that. I'm gonna bite into this and suck all the juice right out of it if I can. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he's that kind of guy. And when I read his one, I went, oh, Whereas Keith Richards, I go, and it was big. It sure made a great doorstop. But and since we're gonna slog a few people, why not go for it? The most disappointing one for me was the Clapton one. I just felt like he didn't even give you any insight into the things. I'm going, oh man, I really want to know, when Cream broke up, like, what was it like when that was happening? What was the shit that was going down? Nothing. And then, he was a drug addict, and it happened on more than one occasion where his drugs got in the way of, relationships and bands, and nothing. I learned more about Eric Clapton from the Ronnie Wood, biography memoir than I did from and I go, well, that's not right. Come on, if you think about it, Clapton is the kind of guy that, like, when you see him on stage, he kind of plays it safe. He doesn't really. He's a gentleman. He doesn't really step outside of himself. He's a reserved kind of performer. He doesn't make anywhere near the weird guitar faces that Joe Walsh makes, for example. Joe Walsh and I, we're from the school of, hey, we're going to act like crazy gorillas in the mist, whereas Clapton is very, contained. And so maybe it's no surprise that his biography kind of felt like, he's making sure that he errs on the side of, being diplomatic or being, careful, not saying anything that might hurt someone. And of course, he's been through a lot of pain in his life, and so there may be that like good reasons for him to be cautious in that regard. Me, on the other hand.
Well, that was the thing. In the Triumph chapter, you told your side of the story very diplomatically, without it turning into a mudraking exercise, really, right?
Yeah, and I intentionally so. I had a friend, Terrence Hart Young, who did a lot of reads of that chapter for me. And, there were moments where he would be sitting there saying to me, Rik, you can't say this. They'll never talk to you again. Really? Yeah. And I went, okay, no, I can see that. And he would say, look, even when it went bad, what it's going bad over is that one guy wants the band to be what he wants it to be, and you want the band to be what you want it to be. You both want the same thing. They're just different things, but it's the same thing. You've got to respect the fact that really that's what you're talking about here. No matter how ugly it got or how terrible it was, you were both really, still chasing the same thing. It was just you wanted it for yourself. Yeah. There was a selfishness there. And of course, the human equation boils down to this really in the end. We go through life and there's certain things that we want out of our lives for ourselves. There's a selfishness in being human. But then the other side of it is, but then, we have kids or we get married and we join a band. And then now now it's, as I say in the book, the Triumph thing was the Musketeers, the three Musketeers, all for one and one for all. Now you're living for someone else and you're in service to someone else. And that becomes a really important part of everyone's sense of virtue. Like, how do you decide that you will allocate your resources to be kind and generous? And certainly, when you're in a rock band for, 13 years, everybody is doing good things for each other. That's part of the history of it, And Terry would say to me, you got to remember that. When you have an old friend read your book, the guy that knew you when you were an idiot in grade 11, and goes and gives you that advice, you go, okay, that's good advice. Yes, thank you. I will remember that. And I will leaven that chapter with that kind of spirit. I'll try to balance my vice with my virtue,
That's fantastic perspective. That it just occurred to me that somebody who knew you before you were Rik Emmett of Triumph, saw you in both capacities.
Yes.
And is able to kind of, quantify.
I saw that pretty early in my life. Like, as I became, a rock star, Rik is making air quotes, I could see the other rock stars that they kept moving on. They left their old life behind and now they were inhabiting this new life, and it was everything. Oh, I'm going to marry that Playboy playmate. I'm going to be doing these drugs. I'm going to be buying this car. When I was a rock star, I was hanging out with my old high school buddies, going and playing baseball and ball hockey with my brother. I was buying a house 2 blocks away from me from my parents, so that we would have built-in babysitting close at hand for the kids we were having, my wife and I. My wife now of 47 years. That was the kind of guy that I was. I wasn't really. We were talking earlier. I just want to mention this for your listeners.
We had like a 3-hour chat earlier.
Yeah.
Over lunch.
And Brent was telling me that, when he was a high school kid, he was afraid to do drugs.
It's true.
And I was too, kind of, I'm not as afraid as he was. because maybe I had a little bit more rock star in me than you did. I don't know, but
You did.
so there was a little bit of acid I might have dropped. There was some hash oil I might have smoked. Yeah. I mean, I was not. I was not as pure as the driven snow by any means. But, that fear, I think, it's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. So,
yeah.
Anyways, I can't remember what we were talking. Why was I raising this? What were we talking about?
We were talking about the rock star thing. And I wanted to touch on this because this is something that occurred to me also. In the book, you're very reluctant to refer to yourself as a rock star. And I'm not surprised by that because I've never known you to be that type of person. But it really makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because when you listen to songs like Fight the Good Fight, for example, you're not so much a rock star as you are almost a cheerleader and a kind of a motivator, as it were.
Yeah, in my life, like when I was a kid in Cubs, Wolf Cubs, I would end up being the sixer, the leader of the little group.
Okay.
They would say, "Oh, this guy's got leadership potential." In Boy Scouts, I would often be the person that would be put in charge of something and to organize it. And I think part of it is ego and energy and skill set and communication skills, that kind of stuff. I would be shy initially in social circumstances, but once I got the lay of the land, I was not averse to shooting my big mouth off, and sometimes that'd get me in trouble, but most of the time it was something where people went, "Hey, this guy's got something to say," and that seems like that's good. Like when I was in church, I went to Sunday school, and my mom would make sure that I always attended until we had a very large schism when I was about 11, 12, 13, maybe. Was like, I'm never going again. I can't buy into this anymore, But I can remember there was her name was Margaret Alsop. She was the woman that was sort of led the Sunday school for the 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds at Runnymede United Church, where I went. And at one point she sat me down and said, I can really see this. Someday I think you can be a minister.
Wow.
She said, I really, your understanding of the Bible is solid and good and blah, blah, blah. And I went, "Oh, lady, you
have no idea."
Yeah, I've already got one foot out the door. I don't know if you realize that or not, but in any case, that popped into my head because later when I was writing songs, I was thinking, "Oh, I hope I'm not being too overbearing. I hope I'm not, I hope there's not too much fire and brimstone in this, sermon that I'm delivering from the pulpit." And I do think that some people found Triumph a little too pedantic. This fight the good fight, never surrender, hold on to your dreams, this kind of stuff. But I do feel like it was also, that was the plank in the Triumph platform that really made it solid, in the sense of, where did we connect with the audience in the seats?
Exactly.
Like, what was it that made Triumph be Triumph? It called itself that, by God. What kind of band calls itself Triumph? Triumph of what? Triumph of the will? But so I think triumph of the human spirit, triumph of the, triumph of your own self-empowerment. Like, before there was self-help, Rick's making air quotes again, there was, motivation and inspiration to offer in music. And that's one of the things I wanted to do.
Yeah. But it was rare. It didn't, we'll go back to the bands that I had named previously. That didn't happen in those bands.
I think it was what made us stand apart from those bands. And I think in the end, that was the good thing for Triumph. Having said that, I'm not so sure the other two guys in the band felt the same way. Like, I think if at the Oz Festival, I think if Gil had maybe had his druthers, Triumph would have been something that really did fit in with Ozzy and Judas and Priest and Scorpions and, Motley Crue. Yeah. That Triumph fit right in there because we had the big show and we were this, rock band of We were the rock and roll machine, you know. And I get that. I understand that. Yeah, that wasn't where I lived, you know.
No.
That wasn't where I fancied myself making my daily bread.
But see, that's the crux of this book. You know, you relinquish the title of the rock star, and you almost kind of, you know, there's little clues along the way. Ordinary Man is a great one off the top of my head. In the book, you actually say, I think, you're kind of inhabiting the persona of a rock star, because that's what you did and you had to do to a degree. But ordinary man, there were these little clues along the way that you weren't really, you know, a rock star per se, like someone like Tommy Lee would be, or whoever else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, that whole thing of larger than life or smaller than life. Mm-hmm. I wish I could have thought of a better word. Smaller than, you know, certain kinds of realities. Like, to go back to something you said earlier, you said, well, you know, I'm not comfortable calling myself a rock star. In one way, that's true. In another way, no, I'll own it. Like, I own it, you know, and in a way I need to own it in order to be able to put it on the cover of the book in order to try and sell the books. You know, I mean, I'm sitting here now talking to you because we're hoping to try and sell the book. And most of the time we've been talking about Triumph, even though we know Triumph is only one small chapter in this whole big book, you know. So there's a perspective, right?
Yes. Rockstar
is all automatically larger than life. You just say the term and the phrase and boom, you know, everybody has a picture of a rock star in their mind, you know, and how rock stars behave and what rock stars are supposed to be, you know. Yep. Mick Jagger is a rock star, you know, and acts like it and has had a lifestyle like it. And how many wives has he had, you know? And at 80, he's still, you know, doing 3-hour shows where he runs around like he's, you know, a 25-year-old.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I go, not for me, you know, like, wow, I can't live up to that kind of legendary status, you know. But I did, you know, I wore the spandex pants and I jumped off the drum risers and and I've got the knees now to prove it. You know, like I know what it feels like to have been in that, worn those shoes, been in that role. You know, I think it helped inform the fact that I knew that wasn't really who I was. You know, it was a role I could play. So in the same way that maybe an actor has talent and their talent leads them to having this life. Like, I was watching a thing the other night on TV and it was Ryan Gosling was playing piano in La La Land, you know, and I don't know how they did that. They must have that must be some sort of digital magic, because his hands are doing things that only an incredibly virtuosic jazz player could do. Oh. So I'm thinking, how is that even possible? But nevertheless, he must have a certain modicum of talent to be able to pull that off. And some of it is him indeed, you know, doing his thing. Ryan Gosling's not a piano player. He's not a jazz artist. He's an actor. And he inhabits these things. He dances. He's Ken in a Ken and Barbie movie, you know. Exactly. Like, he can become what he decides he's going to take his talent and do. So as a musician, I was able to sort of see that and go, yeah, I can do this. You know, I can make this happen. It's not who I am. Who I am is always distinct from what I do. I mean, actors complain about it all the time. They're walking, you know, the guy from Seinfeld is walking down the street and people are going, hey, you know, they're yelling. Oh, who was the guy in the glasses? Oh, Newman. No, yeah, George. Newman, but no, the other guy that was his pal. George. Yeah. They go, hey, Costanza. Yeah, right. And he goes, yeah, I'm not Costanza, but Costanza. Hello. Yes, great. You know, people will know you for what you do. They're not going to know you for who you are. Only the people that really spend time with you and your friends, your family, they're going to know who you are. Other folks are just going to know what you do. So that's one of the things in the book that I sort of try to get people to see and understand and even apply to their own lives. You'll be judged by the things that you do, you know, by others who don't know you, you know, but so what do you want those folks to think about you? Who do you want them to think you are? So then there has to become this marriage of who you actually are. And I used to teach this in business class to the students all the time. You're going to, image, you'll have to decide. You have to project something. You have to sell something. You're marketing something. But if there's not something of you that's really in there, that's integral to what it is that you're promoting and marketing, you're not going to be comfortable. You got to put something of yourself at stake in that and go, no, I really believe in this, So when you were talking earlier about Suitcase Blues, we're talking about Fight the Good Fight, whatever, all that stuff. There was always that for me, that I was going, no, I'm going to fight to try to make sure that I've got some of me in here. Whether you guys like it or not, to the guys in the band, to an audience, whether you guys like it or not. I'm sorry, but I'm in this for me, partly. Yes, I'm in this for you, but I'm also in this for me. So there's got to be something of me here. And if you won't accept it, well, tough shit. I'm going to do it. And of course, album sales go from being, the size of a mountain to, being in a little anthill. But, you go, oh, well, that's life. That's fine. I can accept that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a great line at the end of one of the passages in the book where you say, I was able to turn the unreal into the real, which I thought was really prescient.
Oh, yeah. What was the context for that? Do you remember?
It was that.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about the rock star persona and
yeah.
How things are sometimes not real, but, the image versus reality.
One of the things that I used to really like about being with Mike and Gil was that we all shared the same kind of sense of humor. We all recognized the surreal nature of what it was that we were chasing and doing, and how it could go from, amazing to horrible in an instant, And it reminds me of Alex Lifeson and Rush might have said something once where he was talking about the Rush getting together after a long hiatus or something, and getting together for rehearsals and sitting down. And it might have been Neil that said it. Might have been Alex, I'm not sure, but one of them sort of said, oh, we're the worst Rush copy cover band I've ever heard. So even, a band that had pretty high standards, sometimes it's the wheels have come off and it's just lousy. It's just not very good, And I love that they were sort of, revealing that in that story, that anecdote. Gil and Mike and I, we always did have that ability to kind of laugh at ourselves privately, even though, up on stage when it was going on, it was like, we are larger than life. We are the gods of hell and fire. Wasn't that? I'm thinking of it. I'm not going to remember the name of the artist, but it sounded like fire. Da-da-da, it'll make you burn. Da-da-da, fire.
His name Arthur Brown.
Yeah. And I think there was a, like a weird little at the beginning of the song. I am the god of hell and fire, and I bring you fire. It's like
so bizarre.
Oh, yeah, Arthur Brown, the crazy world of Arthur Brown.
You know who really loved that guy?
No,
Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden.
Oh yeah,
and they kind of almost adopted that shtick to a degree, right?
Yeah.
The whole fire and brimstone thing, yeah.
Nice.
Arthur Brown.
Yeah, Triumph didn't go that far, but certainly we had an element of that. I mean, we were one of the only bar bands on the planet Earth that had a flamethrower. Mm-hmm. We had a propane torch that could shoot balls of flame right up into the air. We set off a few sprinklers in our day. Do you want to hear a story about that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we're playing the Black Hawk Motor Inn in Richmond Hill.
Oh, God.
Yeah, but it was kind of nice. It was a basement thing, and it had carpeting, and it had little areas that had couches and easy chairs and coffee tables, as well as being a bar. So it was kind of a classy joint.
Okay.
But we were in there, and our flamethrower went off, and it, those kind of sprinkler systems that have the little cogged wheel,
yes,
which is essentially there's I think a little thing of wax or something that's in it, and if it melts, then off it goes, right? Yeah. Something that trips in it, and so if that sprinkler system hasn't run since its inception, the water that's going to come out in the initial stages is going to be black with the rust and the grime and the crap that's been in the pipes, that's collected in the pipes. So when our thing shot off the sprinklers, the girls' dresses were ruined and like black tarry crap on the carpets and the things. And meanwhile, we're beating a hasty retreat back to our dressing room, which is a room in the motel, and we're thinking, oh no, this guy, the owner's going to kill us. And I always used to give credit to Mike and Gil for when the guy came. They turned the guy around so that he became. When I told the story in front of them, or raised the issue, they said, no. When he showed up, he was actually saying, you know what, this is one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And I went, what? And it was because the guy had been trying to get coverage in the local papers for his club. And he said, I'm going to be able to get this on the front page of the Richmond Hill Gazette or whatever the Richmond Hill newspaper is. Right. He goes, I'm going to, and naturally, of course, I've got you guys over a barrel now. You owe me because you've ruined my place. And I'm going to have to make insurance claims. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do that. But you're going to have to come back next Thursday night to play. And then 2 weeks after that, you're coming on a Saturday night. And I'm only going to pay you this amount of money because, so he cut his own deal, but we became sort of like, Triumph takes over Richmond Hill in that month So there was this thing of Triumph being able to take the most absurd, surreal thing, and then somehow it would turn around and it would become, this is golden. This is, how did this happen? We're great. But part of that was because Mike and Gil did have that kind of creative ambition, that vision to be able to see how they could make those things kind of happen,
In that sense, it was a very good synergy, right? Because the book talks about this a little bit too, is that those guys were very, more so at least business-minded. You were more of an artist. They were focused on the business aspect and the growth of that business through things like flamethrowers and light shows and bombast.
Yeah, that was all Gil. No, Mike had this ability to apply that to radio and promotion and marketing. And then in his dealings with the record company, Mike was a guy that would take sort of Gil's attitude that lived in that world of production and booking agents and that side of the band. And then this other world that was, marketing and radio and sales of records in record stores and that whole side of things.
Yeah.
Mike had a real strength and a gift for that. So yeah, for us on the table, as the things got divided, it was like, okay, Rick, you come up with the creative stuff, so what should the album cover look like? Now, not all the time, because there were times where the other guys would say, hey, I haven't done an album cover for, in 6 albums. So can it be my turn? Let me do one. And you go, okay, so.
That's interesting. Like, how did that work?
Well, I think that was just a question of sometimes egos would get to a certain point and then somebody would say, hey, I want to. So like the Sport of Kings record, I had already started checking out. Yeah. And Mike kind of became a guy in the driver's seat for that album cover design with MCA and with the record company. Right. And I always felt like if you let the record company have too much input, you were heading towards disaster.
Absolutely.
But of course, that was the way I had been weaned. That's how I'd been taught from the early stages by those guys. So it was kind of weird when the tables turned. But anyhow.
See, now I'm thinking, and I think that people who are listening to this are also thinking this, who are Triumph fans, they're going through the records. So who is responsible for what?
Yeah.
So like Progressions of Power, who is responsible for that?
That was more Gil. That was his record.
Okay.
Kind of, because he wanted to sing the singles and he felt like the Just a Game album had been very much Rick. That cover, those songs, That had been very much a Rik album.
That was your cover of that.
So Progressions was going to be a Gil album. And that cover got shot in the RCA building in New York, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
So, and it was very much a thing of RCA saying, well, let's do a thing where it's kind of going to be like the Beatles. Remember Meet the Beatles in half in shadow, half in light? Right. So it was going to be kind of one of those kinds of things, except I think Gil's idea was with lasers.
Of course.
So the three faces with lasers shooting at him.
Yeah. I had that. I told you this a long time ago. You probably don't remember. I had that 8-track when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah?
And I would stare at that cover. As like an 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid. Yeah. I was listening to Just a Game on the way over. I love that record. I think it's great. Like Allied Forces is my favorite. And I think it's yours as well. But
yeah, if I could, my combination would be a little bit of Just a Game and a little bit of Allied Forces. And I would make, a greatest hits out of that. And I would go, these were my finest moments. Although, there's finest moments that, and I don't say this because I'm trying to say I had incredibly fine moments, constantly. But some things get lost in the shuffle. And you're talking about Progressions of Power. Mm-hmm. A fan reminded me, and they said, hey, when's the last time you listened to In the Night? You should listen to In the Night off Progressions of Power, because that's an unbelievable vocal and guitar performance. Mm. And I go, well, I haven't listened to that in 30 years. Okay, yeah. I'll give it a listen. And I went, wow, how did I ever sing so high? I can't believe that I would have given myself a vocal to try and capture with those notes in it, yikes. It was crazy. So, and there were the last album we made, Surveillance. Yeah. There was stuff on there where I got to play with Steve Morse, mm-hmm. and we did some co-writing. And there's a thing where he and I wrote a thing, sort of All the King's Horses, and it leads into Carry On the Flame. And Carry On the Flame is a song that's in that mold of hold on to your dreams, fight the good fight, never surrender. Like a motivational, inspirational, why are we here kind of song, And I felt like that song, it just disappeared kind of off the planet, back to our thing when we were saying about the book that doesn't get read, there's no legacy there because not enough folks, found their way to it in order to make it become evergreen. And you need that. If that doesn't happen, you're as an artist, you're not going to survive,
True.
Yeah.
But all the songs that you did name will.
Yeah. I'm still coming to terms with that in my mind. The whole idea of how evergreen will evergreen actually be, especially because in my life now, I mostly listen to classical music and jazz music and I'm going, Miles and Bill Evans, they're not going anywhere, mm-hmm. Mozart and Beethoven, and they're not going anywhere. They're going to be around forever, And here's one, okay? I was just reading on my news feed. Yeah. Marty Scorsese wrote something about Robbie Robertson. Yeah. And so it's a eulogy kind of, memorial kind of thing. And he said they were in some place, there was a gallery, I think they were in France or something, and they'd been walking around looking at masters, mm-hmm. just unbelievable. Maybe it was Italy. I don't know, but wherever, And they lost track of each other, and then they found each other again. And Robertson was sitting on a stoop outside when he came out and he walked down. He stood in front of Robbie Robertson, and Robbie Robertson looked at him and he said, "We're bums." And Scorsese goes, I know, we're bums. Yeah. So I think there's a perspective there, where I've had a nice taste. I've had more of a taste than maybe I even deserved. Certainly more of a taste than most folks get. But come on, I didn't have anywhere near the taste Paul McCartney's had, Elton John has had, Yeah. And when it comes to the world of guitar players, come on, man, I can name 50 of them that are just, and Rik is now gesturing far above his own head. They're way above my head. They're guys that are just unsurpassingly gifted and talented on a level that I'm not. So, but I'm not, it's not like I'm playing the modesty card here. I go, those guys can't sing as good as me.
See?
They don't write tunes as good as I did, And so my thing is that I'm kind of a 3-card player, singer, songwriter, guitarist.
Mm-hmm.
And of the combination of the three kind of, but combination guys don't really get the same kind of legacy
Right.
that somebody that's unsurpassingly, unbelievably great at one thing, they become the thing that sticks, you know. And of course, I had record company guys tell me that all my life. Rick, don't be so eclectic. Focus. Come on, man. You got to focus. And you go, yeah, I'm sorry. I can't really focus. It's not my thing.
Think about that for a second, though. You think about someone like, I'm just going to, off the top of my head, Eddie Van Halen, otherworldly player, but that's it. Right. And I'm not downplaying this.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there were some pretty good tunes in the Van Halen catalog. And
for
I
sure.
thought when he was teamed up with Sammy, I thought they came up with some even better ones than he'd had with David. David was a little bit too much of a kind of a yabba dabba doo rock star cheerleader kind of, put on a show kind of a guy. Whereas Sammy could sort of, right now.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty good tune. Like, and if you think about like bump, 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 ba-da, bump, ba-da-da, that's a amazing keyboard riff.
Yeah.
And that's writing. That's Eddie's writing, on a keyboard.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, I can't do that. Like I can't write on a keyboard. I can't. Some guys are adept at, and so Eddie was. So you got to give him some.
Oh no! Don't get me wrong. He's maybe my favorite. However,
can't say he's good to me.
No. The point. Maybe that was a bad choice. But the point,
no.
The point I was going to make.
Yes, it's a good point.
When somebody is so recognized intensely for being so good at that one thing, they don't have those other two things.
I know, but
you've got so. This is kind of it's hard to present to you, but like think about that. So songwriting, singing, guitar playing, those three things you didn't just do capably, you did way above average in terms of capability and skill. So maybe you're not Eddie Van Halen. Who is really? Can you name another person who was an amazing songwriter, an amazing singer, and was up there, and we talked about this in the tag of like Fight the Good Fight, up there with Geddy Lee in terms of like high notes, and an amazing guitar player. You sell yourself short.
Well, thank you. I can name some, sure. Like Paul McCartney was always a hero of mine, and I think that McCartney is one of the world's best musicians because he has the ability. He's in his 80s now. I'm not sure he can sing the way he used to. None of us can. Said the guy who's been doing an interview now for about 40 minutes and his throat is almost gone. Just to speak to the point a little bit more. One of my favorite guitarists in history was Jeff Beck. Mm-hmm. And Beck is a guy that was capable of playing fingerstyle kind of jazz, but he never did. Never made records where he did it. But if you search around on YouTube, you can find this little moment where he's got a Strat in his hand and the guy's interviewing him and Jeff goes, well, blah, blah, blah. And he plays like this little passage and you go, oh, wow, that's incredible. Like he's never done that on record. He does because his thing is Jeff goes, no, I'm going to make the guitar talk. I'm going to make a guitar sing. It's going to be my voice. I'm not going to sing. And he always hated the fact that he'd had a hit record in England. I can't remember what it was called. It was something stupid like Hi Ho Hip Hop Here We Go. Or it was something stupid like that. That's not what it was, but it was something like that. And, he for his whole life, he kept trying to avoid it until finally he went, okay. I'll do it. I'll play it live. So, you can make a video and you can put it on YouTube. But he didn't want to be a pop guy. He wanted to be seen as this true sort of guitar legend that he really was. And he focused himself intentionally so that he played just on that Strat. He played just this kind of stuff with this kind of technique that he'd specialized, an incredibly specialized technique, which there's nobody else on the planet Earth that can do it. Only he could. And now if anybody did, they'd go, well, you're just a pale imitation of Jeff Beck. So there's no point in doing it because Jeff Beck already did it as good as it could ever be done. My legacy will not be in that category. It won't. I can live with that. However, once my memoir has sold 7 million copies.
Now you're talking.
Then people will say, there weren't a lot of rock stars that then became novelists of that.
Poet laureates. All right. So now, as we often do, we're doing a two-parter. This is the end of part 1.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yabba dabba do.
We are surrounded by guitars.
Yes.
In the second part, will you be playing one of them?
Yeah, well, we'll see. Wait, I need to take my drugs.
So let's take a break. You can take your drugs.
Yeah.
And then we will come back. We're going to talk about possibly some Triumph surprises, not possibly, for sure, all the instrumental work you've been doing and working up.
Yes, great. Good.
And then some of your other projects as well. And maybe you'll play a guitar.
Beauty, yeah. I can do that. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for part 1. This has been fun. Brent.
Oh, it has. I love this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Here we go again. Another year, another 2 episodes.
It's not even Christmas.
All right. We'll see you in a couple of clicks, folks.
Yes. All right. This has been No Sleep Till Sudbury with Brent Jensen and my very special guest, Mr. Rik Emmett. Until next time, folks. Take good care.
Brent Jensen is the best-selling author of No Sleep Till Sudbury, Leftover People, and All My Favorite People Are Broken. All titles available in stores and on Amazon worldwide.